I want to welcome everybody that is on here. Professor Zig, I don't know if you can see all the boxes, but there are about 50 people that have tuned into this program right now, and we have more people still signing in. We had about 100 people registered, which is really cool. It's wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces and new friends too popping up on the screen. So that the other, not Professor Zig, but everyone else, so that the audio is clear, we ask you to keep yourself muted during the program. Professor Zig, you used to keep it just the way it is, but everybody else, if you could keep your machine on mute, that'll help make sure that the audio stays clear for everyone else. Feel free to put your name in the chat where you're calling from if you would like to do that. My name is Kate Wofford. I'm with Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley. I see a lot of people on here who are longtime supporters of our work. Thank you. For those of you who are new to us, the Alliance was created in 2018 from a merger of several longstanding county-based conservation groups. And now as one organization, we are working hard to achieve the vision, which is a Shenandoah Valley where our way of life is sustained by rural landscapes, clean streams and rivers, and thriving communities. We work in 6 valley counties, and in non-COVID times, our offices are in Newmarket. I want to give a quick shout out to some of the board members of ours that are on this call. Our founding board chairwoman, Joan Cominor, is here with us, I think. Our vice chair, Christine Andrea. I see Bobby White-Scarver from Augusta County, Dolly Frazier from Rockingham, Carolyn Long from Shenandoah County. I may be missing some because I can only see some boxes, but thanks y'all for being here. And we hope all of you will stay in touch with us after this program is over. Make sure you're getting our email. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, connect with us there. Donate money. We run 100% on charitable gifts. So donations at every level keep us going, please, and thank you. And it's my pleasure to be the MC for our first Valley Treasure Award ceremony. And for this new award, we asked people to help us identify the community members out there who have been quietly working to make sure the Shenandoah Valley remains the extraordinary place that it is. And we are so happy that the deserving Charles Ziegenfus, also known as Professor Zig, is our inaugural winner. We're going to hear more about Professor Zig's contributions later in the agenda. I love this clapping. We're going to hear more about Professor Zig's contributions later in the agenda tonight. But first, I am really happy to introduce to you all my friend and colleague, Dr. Amy Johnson. If you don't know Amy, she is a conservation ecologist, and she runs the Virginia Working Landscapes, which is a community-based research program at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute based nearby in Front Royal. Like Professor Zig, Amy spends a lot of time thinking about how to engage citizens and landowners in conservation, especially working lands and bird habitat. Apparently she was up at 4 a.m. this morning with her team getting ready to go do some banding work with meadow larks. So it's like Amy's bedtime right now. So we're extra grateful that she is taking time to be here with us during what probably should be a time she's about to go to bed and do it again. We thought Amy, because of her work and her passion, was the perfect person to join us tonight to talk about the role of community members in preserving the valley's working lands and biodiversity. So Amy is going to present to us about her work for about 25 minutes. And then we have time for a couple of questions before we move on to the award part of the program. If you've got questions for Amy, feel free to drop those in the chat and we will work those in at the end of her program. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand it over to Dr. Amy Johnson.
Hey, great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kate. I just want to make sure I can get my screen up here. Okay, can everybody see my title screen? Good. Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak here tonight. It's such an honor to be given an opportunity to share the screen with the one and only Professor Zig. I've heard so much about him over the last decade as I've been doing work here in the Shenandoah Valley and Northern Piedmont. And not only that, but I've been so fortunate to work with several of his students over the last decade. And it's very clear to me that he is creating this everlasting legacy of his work in everyone who has the pleasure of working with him. So before we hear from Dr. Zig, I was asked to join you all here tonight to give an introduction to the importance of birds in our landscape and the importance of really connecting communities with these birds. After all, Professor Zig's life has been dedicated to working with the community to study and preserve the birds that make this valley so special. And I just wanted to share with you some of my perspectives as to why community-based conservation is so important for our birds, and then also provide some examples of how our community members are working with scientists to ensure that our bird populations are healthy and thriving for generations to come. So this is a photo of me. I'm right here, this shadow in the grasses. This is one of my favorite places in the valley. This is a cattle farm in Swope, Virginia, where this sea of endless grasses hover against the base of the mountains. So standing here with me is my then intern, Justin, and the owner of this particular farm, Michael. It's situations like this that just make me hopeful for the future of bird conservation. So here we have a young budding conservationist getting out in the field alongside scientists and also alongside some of our best teachers around, the farmers who work, who know, and who love the land that these birds depend on. And Justin here is actually one of Professor Zig's past students, and he has since moved on to complete a master's in ornithology, and he still collaborates with me and my colleagues at Smithsonian as a conservation biologist. So really impressive to see all of the offspring of Professor Zig in the community. So this photo speaks volumes to me, as I feel it really illustrates all of the necessities of successful bird conservation, and that is habitat, it's science, it's people, and it's passion. So at this point in time, birds need our help more than ever. A recent study shows that we've lost nearly 3 billion birds since 1970. And grassland birds, these are the birds that I've studied for over a decade now, and these are the birds that live amongst our working farms. This is the group of birds that has taken the hardest hit. So more than 700 million breeding grassland birds have been lost across 31 species just over the last 50 years. So for every 5 bobolinks we had in the 70s, we now only have 2. So this is a species we rarely find anymore where I work in Virginia. We've lost 75% of our loggerhead shrikes. So these are robin-sized predatory songbirds that actually impale their prey on thorns and barbed wire fences. And I was just talking to Bobby Whitescarver, who's on the call today, and he told me he had a shrike near his property, I think just this week. So I'm really excited to hear more about that. And this is my personal favorite, the eastern meadowlark. Only 1 out of 4 remains that existed in the 1970s. So what's going on here? Why are we losing so many of our grassland birds? Unfortunately, habitat loss and agricultural intensification are some of the most significant drivers. For grassland birds, they actually nest directly on the ground. So a single hay harvest can kill 94% of the baby birds in the field. And then in addition to this, there's threats from pesticide use, urban development, outdoor cats are a big problem, as well as climate change. So why should we care? Why do birds matter to us? For one, the health of our bird communities that we see right here in the valley are directly related to the health of our planet. So as we lose individual birds, as we lose whole suites of species, we're losing resiliency, and this makes our planet less adaptable to change. So birds provide us with a wealth of important services. They feed on our agricultural pests, they disperse our seeds, they plant our trees, they pollinate our plants, and then through all of these actions, through their whole life cycle, they're constantly replenishing nutrients back into the soils that support our entire livelihood. And that's not all. So research is increasingly linking exposure to nature, and specifically exposure to birds, with improved well-being. So just this past December, a new study out of Germany connected greater bird diversity to increased life satisfaction. Can you believe it? I mean, I can, I guess. So it turns out that people who live near natural areas with a greater diversity of bird species were notably happier. And so the study found that even just seeing a 10% increase in bird species generates satisfaction on par with a comparable increase in income. So basically birds equals money, which is pretty exciting to see in a scientific report. And seeing a wide array of birds isn't the only thing that affects our moods, so does hearing them. According to another recent study, hikers who listen to birdsong while moseying on a trail have a more positive overall experience, and they feel greater joy. So I think many birders, including Zig, know this intuitively, but I also think this became quite evident this year and last year during COVID, when we saw more and more people going outside, getting out to go birding. And I think potentially the sight and sound of birds is, it ignites us because it potentially restores our faith in just the natural order of the world, right? When everything else is so chaotic and out of the norm, our birds are still there, and they're still doing their thing and improving our well-being while they're at it. So how do we help preserve birds? To start, we need to know where they spend their time. We need to know how they spend their time so that we can provide them with the support they need. But this can be somewhat tricky for a conservation scientist. Research has shown that more than 80% of grassland bird habitat distribution actually falls on private lands. So the rolling hay fields that you see across the countryside, those fields that are truly vital to the livelihoods of our neighbors and all of our farming families, these are the homes of our grassland birds too. So in order to successfully conduct research on these birds and their habitats, and then to go ahead and implement science-based conservation strategies for these birds, we have to collaborate with private landowners, and we have to facilitate models that work for both birds and people. And I think this is really the essence of what Professor Zig has been instilling in his students for decades. So as Kate mentioned, I'm the program director for Virginia Working Landscape. We are a Smithsonian-based research program that brings together scientists, landowners, citizen scientists, and regional partners to study and promote the management of our landscapes for native biodiversity. And this includes our region's grassland birds. So almost all of our research is conducted on private lands, and thus collaborations with the community and our landowners is essential. And VWL is not just a product of the Smithsonian, it's more of a collaborative effort among several regional partners that all play into the success of our work. So for example, we have a phenomenal steering committee. It's made up of local landowners and conservation professionals, including representatives from Shenandoah Alliance, and they advise us on program development. And then we work closely with partners like NGOs, land trusts, colleges, and universities, and all of these partners help to enhance our collective impact. And then we work with over 150 private landowners and have trained more than probably 200 citizen scientists at this point to assist us with our efforts. So it really is a collaborative effort. So in general, our research program aims to really help us enhance our understanding of the local ecosystems that we have right here in the Valley in Northern Piedmont. And we hope that our research can help generate information to help inform best management practices. We really try to harness the expertise of our community partners. So this includes our citizen scientists, our landowners, as well as our partnering scientists, and build these collaborative projects together. And then finally, we aim to really just engage the community in conservation science and get them excited about involving science in all of our decision making. So just to give you an idea of where we are, we anchor our research here in the Shenandoah Valley in Northern Piedmont. We started with 12 properties in 2010, and we've grown to more than 150 properties at this point. I think covering probably more than 80,000 acres across the 16 county region. And this region is predominantly privately owned. So as I'm sure that Professor Zig would tell you, you can really learn so much from collaborating with landowners on research. So much so that the efforts of the landowners we work with have inspired several of our current research projects that will ultimately help us better understand and preserve our region's birds. So I'd just like to go through a couple examples of those now. So to start, this is a farm in Shenandoah County, Virginia. The landowners at this property have been very busy over the last decade restoring old pastures into some of the most incredible native wildflower meadows you will ever see. And given all the work that has gone into these restoration efforts, the landowners are really keen to share their experiences with other landowners. So helping others along the way as they embark in similar projects on their own properties. And while the results of this restoration project have provided ample habitat for pollinators, as you can imagine, our citizen scientists have also documented breeding activity of some of our region's most vulnerable species, like this field sparrow. It's taking full advantage of the insect community provided by the native meadow to feed its fledglings. So as a result of projects like these that are led by landowners, they've inspired our team to partner with some other organizations in the region to learn more about meadow management and how we can optimize restoration outcomes for our region's biodiversity. So for this particular project, the Making of a Meadow, we're documenting outcomes associated with different native wildflower establishment and management methods. So we're just in our second year of preparing these fields, and we're going to be planting our native wildflowers in the next couple of months at 3 different locations. And this all stemmed from just working with landowners in the region and then giving us ideas about what we need to know more about. So this is another farm in the Shenandoah Valley. This time we're in Augusta County. This is where cattle are rotated through pastures using a method called rotational grazing. And this practice is known for regenerating soil health. It boosts grassland productivity by resting pastures in between bouts of grazing. So conveniently, this practice also creates prime structure for nesting habitat, and the periods of rest give ground nesting birds like eastern meadowlarks that you can see here ample opportunities to hatch out their young. And the birds are actually taking notice. So our citizen scientists have documented some of our region's most rare grassland birds breeding on this farm. So on the left is a photo of a dick thistle. We rarely see these in our area, but they periodically show up in Swope, Virginia, as well as loggerhead shrikes, also known as the butcher bird, because they love to gruesomely impale their prey on sharp objects. So as a result of working with landowners like this and observing the diversity of birds breeding on farms like these, These have inspired another research project. So just last year, we initiated a new pilot study in collaboration with American Farmland Trust to assess the impacts of regenerative grazing as well as haying on the nesting success of these grassland birds. So we worked with American Farmland Trust as well as our local producers to actually co-design this study so that we could optimize opportunities for both the farmers as well as the birds. And in our first year, we monitored over 100 nesting territories of grassland birds. This includes grasshopper sparrows, eastern meadowlarks, and then pictured here are bobolinks. These are their eggs in a nest directly on the ground, maybe their first day of hatching, and then this is right before they fledge the nest. So results from this study will eventually help us define regionally relevant recommendations for bird-friendly agriculture. And then in addition to nesting, our citizen scientists have been helping us document grassland bird species just throughout the entire study region. And they've made note of what species occur, where they occur, and at what densities they occur. So this is a photo here of two of our bird surveyors counting birds at Oxbow Farm, which is in Warren County. So these bird counts enable us to make inferences about what habitat qualities are associated with higher numbers of individual species at different times of the year. And using this information, we can make better recommendations for how to optimize habitats for declining birds on working lands. So for example, Oxbow Farm, they delay their haying in several of their hay fields to allow the grassland birds to nest. So this practice has resulted in particularly high densities of grassland birds, like the eastern meadowlarks you see here on the left, and then bobolinks on the right. Both of these birds are around in high densities throughout the breeding season. Now we know from tracking studies that bobolinks on the right, they leave their breeding grounds at the end of each summer to migrate down all the way to Argentina for the winter. They just got back in the last couple of weeks. It's incredible, the distance they travel. But surprisingly, there's very little information on the migratory strategies of eastern meadowlarks. And so working with farms like this has enabled us to embark on a study with partners to elucidate the seasonal movements of eastern meadowlarks and to learn for the first time where they go in winter and whether or not they even come back to the same breeding grounds, and then how land management might affect that. So these photos were taken just this week. As Kate said, we've been busy tagging birds in the field. You can see this photo on the left. We were working by the light of that beautiful pink supermoon this week. It was just incredible. And then this photo on the bottom right, this is a photo of the landowner of Oxbow Farm releasing one of our first tagged birds, which was really exciting. So I feel like these photos are a testament to the importance of connecting with community members, connecting with landowners to strengthen our collective conservation impact and to learn as much as we can from each other to really move conservation forward. So why is this so important? I wanted to really tie all of this back to the farms, not only the ones that I told you about today, but so many others that have inspired these research projects in the first place. So these are the farms that enrich our countryside with spectacular views. I mean, many of you have at least been in Shenandoah County or Rockingham County, Augusta County, seeing these incredible views, these rolling fields. And all of these farms that are supporting our livelihoods by providing food for us, for our families, providing our ecosystem services like pollination, carbon storage, water filtration, and then hosting some of our region's most vulnerable bird species. So to me, this is the legacy that Professor Zig has created in this region, bridging science with community, connecting landowners to the species that their lands support. And then instilling this immense curiosity and passion in our region's land stewards. And well, not to mention the next generation of conservation scientists. So I guess I'll just end here with a story that was shared with me by one of my current team members, who was fortunate to be one of Professor Zig's students during her time at JMU. So this is Erin Thady. Erin is our survey coordinator. So she is the main point of contact for our collaborating landowners and citizen scientists. She leads up all of our grassland bird surveys and is really just a talented and knowledgeable conservationist. So she actually shared with me that the final exam with Professor Zig's ornithology class was the most fun she's ever had on an exam, which says a lot. I don't know if I've ever had fun on an exam, but apparently their final exam was 2 days long. So I don't know how that could be fun, but it included a picnic in the park. It included several hours of birding around the region. It included a homemade meatloaf dinner for the entire class made by his wife, followed by a final ID session inspired by all of the bird artwork in his house. So according to Erin, it was the most memorable class she took and really shaped who she is as a conservationist. So I'm grateful to Professor Zig for fostering these young minds in such unique and memorable ways and instilling in them that science is something that should be fun and science is something that should be shared with the community around us. And I've been fortunate to work with several of Professor Zig's past students through our work at Virginia Working Landscapes, and I really look forward to more. I think his vision of collaborative conservation couldn't be more important than it is today. So with that, I will end it here. I'll invite any questions if we have the time, and then I would love to pass the virtual mic over to Professor Zig. Thanks so much for your attention.
Amy, that was terrific. Thank you so much for your inspiring work, for that beautiful presentation, for honoring Professor Zig. That was fantastic. We do have, if anybody has questions for Amy, we do have a couple minutes before we move on to the award part of the program. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like, or drop your questions in the chat, or Amy's contact information. You can feel free to get in touch with her through the Virginia Working
I have a question.
Go for it, Bob.
This is Bobby in Swope, and we do see a shrike every now and then here, but I'm interested to know because Amy and her team have some captive shrikes, and they're trying to get them to reproduce, and I was wondering how that was going, Amy.
Sure, great question, Bobby. And we need to get in touch. I want to hear more about your shrikes at the farm. So at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, we have a captive population of loggerhead shrikes. The reason we have that is there's less than 100 shrikes remaining in Virginia. So the fact that Bobby has them on his farm says a lot about the way that he's managing his land and supporting biodiversity, especially some of these more rare species. So the loggerhead shrikes at SCBI, or Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, are actually really productive. These birds are laying about 6 eggs at a time. They've already laid their first clutch. They start really early in a season. And sometimes they're laying up to 3 clutches per season. So all of these fledglings that are raised here in Virginia are actually part of a reintroduction program. So at the end of the breeding season, it's usually around mid-August, all of our fledglings are driven up to Canada, and they're released as part of Wildlife Preservation Canada's loggerhead shrike conservation program. And many of the birds that are released are outfitted with these small radio transmitters so that we can track their movements. And I'll be darned, two of these birds that have been outfitted with transmitters that were raised right here in Virginia have ended up back in this region. One ended up in, it was either Clark or Frederick County. And then another one ended up in Augusta County, actually right close to you all, Bobby. I think Jean Shet found it and took a video of it. So it is a very successful program and has really been augmenting the populations in Canada where the species is listed as critically endangered. So we're thrilled that we're able to contribute to that program through the breeding work that we're doing here in Virginia.
I have a question for you. I'm Diane Lipkowski. I'm here in Rockingham County. I work for Rockingham County's Community Development Department. And of course, development and birding or birds sort of don't go hand in hand. And I'm an avid birder and really appreciate Zig. He's taught me loads. My question is this: we've got some wonderful landowners, including Bobby, who are devoting massive efforts to preserve habitat on their property. I think we have so many farmers, and our farming has, as you mentioned, gotten more and more intensive. But I think they sort of don't know what they're doing, and it would be neat if there were materials, and I think we could even provide them in our office of just little things that they can do that won't affect their bottom line. I just don't think they think about it. Fence rows now totally cleared, harvesting equipment pulls up everything. There's very little waste, we'll call it waste, left for the birds. But just kind of food for thought, if we could come up with just little things to get people interested in maybe making a small effort, I think that could go a long way.
I agree, Diane. And through our research, we've created a document that's available on our website. I think it's actually on the landing page right now. And because my computer's in presentation mode, I can't get to the website, but it's called Field Management Recommendations for Grassland Birds. And it's just a one-page front and back. It talks about what grassland birds need, what some of the species are, and then it actually provides a calendar of when it's optimal to manage if you'd like to promote grassland bird habitat. And then it also gives you a list of recommendations on, small things you can do and big things you can do. Now that document is very fluid. We change it probably every couple of months as we continue to do our research and as we continue to learn more. And not only that, but we change it in response to farmers. So, we give it out to farmers and say, what do you think about the language and how we're describing how you mow and how we're describing how you graze? And so they've provided a lot of input as to how we can reword things to make more sense to farmers. And I think that's really where having people like Bobby in our network has been so helpful. Bobby's a farmer himself. He can talk to the farmers in the way that they understand, but he also knows so much about conservation. And so we really strive to work with farmers like Bobby that can help us tell a story that means a lot to the farmers and not just to the sole conservationists. So we need more Bobbies in our world.
Yes, we do.
Amy, this is Bob Dean. I'm a recently relocated West Virginian. Live in Frederick
Hi, nice
County.
to meet you.
Mutual. Thank you for your presentation. Very good.
Thank
It
you.
got me to thinking about shrikes. I banded shrikes in the eastern part of West Virginia for about 6 years until the population
Great.
absolutely disappeared. And I was wondering if you have any well-founded explanations for their decline and extirpation.
Yeah, that unfortunately we don't have all of the information there. And that's one of the main reasons we haven't started any reintroduction programs here in Virginia and West Virginia. I've worked very closely with Rich Bailey, who's the ornithologist, the state ornithologist in West Virginia, and he does a lot of work on shrikes. I think that guy knows where every single West Virginia shrike is. And you know, we think it has, I think it's a mixture of things, but, you know, their main source of food is insects and small mammals. And so I think pesticide use could be a big problem, but there's never really been solid research to demonstrate that. There's been some research to show whether or not pesticides are transferred into their eggshells, but there hasn't been a lot done on the food sources that they're eating and how contaminated those might be. But I mean, another thing that was just brought up with Diane is shrikes love a good messy fence row. And we've cleaned up all of our fence rows so that they're just perfect and pristine. And as we do that, we're taking away shrike nesting habitat. We're taking away all of the thorns that they love to, you know, stab their prey on and dangle their prey around for their females. So, and then I think also, you know, shrikes really seem to be, at least in West Virginia, they seem to like these overgrazed pastures. It's really interesting. Whereas here in Virginia, we kind of see them in a mix of habitats. And so I think we still have a lot to do to figure out their exact habitat requirements and how they're using different types of habitats within their own range, if that makes sense. Oh, I see Diane wrote in the chat, insecticide use, yeah. And then also they are partial migrants. And so of course with any migrant, they can run into a lot of issues while they're migrating and running into issues like outdoor cats and running into buildings, windows at night when they're migrating. So there's so many things that can affect them during migration as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And sadly, I'm going to have to end the questions there so we can move on with our program. But that was just wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
So now we're going to turn to the award. First, I want to acknowledge my colleague, Kim Woodwell, the Alliance's staff member who guided this process from an idea at the board level a year and a half ago to tonight's program. She's done a wonderful job. And I also want to thank the folks that sat on the Valley Treasure Selection Committee with Kim. That's two of our board members, Joe Lehman and Lee Good, and two community members, Rosemary Wallinger and Bethany Fairfield. So thanks to those people. I'm glad I wasn't sitting on that committee because there were some really outstanding people who were nominated for the award. And I hope in the future we'll be able to recognize them and their contributions. In the meantime, thank you for those of you on this call who may have submitted a nominee. Tonight's winner clearly meets our aspiration to honor someone who has been quietly doing important work to preserve the things that are loved about the Shenandoah Valley. And since we met Professor Zig through these nominations, we have learned that he is an impactful educator, a dedicated researcher, a much loved family member, and a trusted mentor. The award comes with the glory of winning the Valley Treasure Award. There's also a $500 prize, which is made possible by an anonymous family that supports this work. Also, Zig, we have a signed book for you. It's Wendell Berry's collected poems, and the inscription inside the book reads, "For Charles Ziegenfus, with my congratulations, Wendell Berry." How cool is that? So we will get that to you in the next couple of days. We are going to give Professor Zig a chance to say a few words, but first we want to show a short video to show why he is such a deserving Valley treasure. His admirers in the community sent in photos and videos and audio files, which Aaron Birch on our staff has compiled into a video, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. So here's the video.
First met Zig in the mid-'80s when he was banding at the long-running bird banding station on Dolly Sods in the beautiful high Alleghenies of West Virginia called AFMO.
Professor Zig has so much enthusiasm and knowledge about birds, and he loves people and loves to teach.
I nominated Zig for the Valley Treasure Award this year because of his infectious enthusiasm that he's used to motivate scores of students and landowners and bird enthusiasts around the valley.
A number of years ago, bluebird boxes began appearing in our community. And over the years, more and more boxes were added, and they were so professionally erected, and we just assumed it was a state project. But then, about a decade ago, a white, disreputable looking van appeared in our driveway, and a rather rumpled, windblown looking gentleman got out and asked if he could put bluebird boxes on our farm. And we realized that it was a single individual that had been monitoring all of those boxes.
He was the bander who, along with just a couple other folks, extended the season way into October, establishing a much clearer picture of the extent of migration in the big mountains. He was obviously a man who appreciated thoroughness, even if it meant working in the cold and snow.
He's really brought our community together as he's enlisted a number of our neighbors to help him monitor these boxes, and certainly made us much more aware of some of the pressures that our migratory songbirds are facing.
It became painfully obvious also that he was an educator. In the early years of our acquaintance, Zig would lecture me anytime I needed help while extracting birds from the nets. That's not how Kathleen Finnegan taught you, he would say. After I got my own permit and started banding with Zig, he would give me the A to Z lecture about aging and sexing many of the warbler species and others that we banded at AFMO. It was a joy to be showered with all that knowledge. As recently as 3 years ago, Zig took on the task of learning to band raptors. He's been banding saw-whets for decades, but raptors like red-shouldered and red-tailed hawks add another level of potential hurt. And I'm sure Elsie appreciated him taking on the extra task. But he was like the proverbial kid in a candy store. He's now involved with an American kestrel banding project with a number of kestrel boxes added to the 100+ bluebird tree swallow boxes he's been monitoring in Rockingham County for decades. Of course, Zig wrote the book on dark-eyed junco behavior, nesting and migratory phenology, and clarified many of the aging and sexing criteria for the species. Many of his students in ornithology helped with his work and went on field trips all over Rockingham County and beyond. Not many professors now take their students out on field trips much, and that's a real shame. I suspect Zig was not an easy professor, but quite fair and willing to help students who struggle, if they ask for help. The fact that a number of his ornithology alumni have gone on to excel in the field speaks volumes to the impact he had on his students.
In the years that he has taken field trips, done banding demonstrations, birdhouse trails, all of the time encouraging the participants and the landowners alike to dig in and get their hands on participating with conservation in the valley.
He deserves this award because he has worked for decades tirelessly on his own, using funds, his own funds, and to make this valley a more beautiful place, not only for people, but also for wildlife.
Well, Zig, here's to the next red tail. Born a poor young country boy, Mother Nature's son. What? Talk about Zig. Okay.
Professor Zig, can we ask you to say a few words?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm deeply honored that you would find time to look over what I've done and give me this award. You know, it means a lot to me. It's sort of like a culmination of a long career. As is mentioned before, I've touched over 1,000 JMU students and about 200 in individual classes where they learn to handle birds, etc. And then about another 400 who I took along with one of the other colleagues there to the Outer Banks in February, you know, for a 3, sometimes 4-day trip to look at shorebirds. You know, it's something that very few other places do it. And like I mentioned, I also talked to many students, many kids, other kinds of people over in West Virginia at the banding station there. I don't know what else to say. I'm just so thankful that you have considered me.
Nice haircut, Zig.
Well, thank you. I got it just for you, Bob. And Vicky.
Congrats, Granddad.
Hi, Tyler.
Congratulations, Daddy.
Thank you.
It's Jennifer.
Yeah. Hi, Erica.
Congratulations, Dad.
Well, this ends our program. Thank you all so much for coming. Congratulations, Professor Zig, and we look forward to seeing you all at the Valley Treasure Award next year.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you.